This lesson's aimed at GCSE students, so particularly Year 10, but also those students in Year 9 who have opted for GCSE French next year. So we're going to be looking at current affairs and the current pandemic, coronavirus. And this lesson involves some reading comprehension and lots of vocabulary building. It's quite a challenge. And the second half of the lesson is going to give you some phrases and make you able to talk about your own lockdown experience. So here is our first text, which looks super complex, very scientific. I'm going to ask you to approach each of the texts that I've chosen to work with on this PowerPoint in the same way. So I think there's 3 or 4 texts that I've chosen, or articles about the coronavirus. So we obviously know the major theme of this lesson, but what I'd like you to do to understand the text in greater detail is 1, highlight the words you definitely already know. 2, highlight the cognates, so where the French and the English is the same or similar, such as this word here that I've underlined in red, contagieux. I'm hoping you can work out that means contagious without having to open a dictionary. And also highlight any of the absolute brand new words because that's obviously all part and parcel of your vocab learning as you go along. Okay, now this text is going to come up again when I go through the answers with you, but I'm going to ask you to pause the video now so that you can do that initial vocabulary work to find your way around the text a lot better and understand as much as possible without translating it totally fully, because that's not what this activity is about. So coming up are your vocab tasks. Okay, so in that text on the previous slide, which obviously you have the luxury of rewinding and having a look at in greater detail, I am asking you to find the English, or work out the English for those 8 French phrases there. I also would like you to put the 8 English phrases at the bottom into French, so the other way around. And I wonder if you've not already learnt this over the past 3 months, you can work out the explanation for where the name coronavirus came from. Okay. So do pause the video now because I'm going to go through the answers with you. Okay, so here are your answers. I'm going to whiz through 1 to 8 because French into English is always a little bit quicker. So, une maladie is an illness. Number 2, la très grande ville is a very big town. 3, de fortes fièvres. That literally means strong fevers. So we would say high temperatures for that one. As it's not a word for word translation, but it sounds better in English. Number 4, respirer is to breathe. You will know from your study of science, biology, that respiration is breathing. So respirer, to breathe, has a connection there. Number 5, contagieux, we just met it, is contagious. Number 6, il a contaminé, means he or it, in fact, has contaminated. So what you have there on the end of that verb is an E accent, which should be a reminder for you that you're talking in the past. Number 7, this one means expanded. So we know that it expands really quite quickly. So that's what number 7 is. And number 8, okay, that last one there is invisible to the naked eye, which is one of the main problems, isn't it? We just don't know where it is. Right, at the bottom of the second half of the activity, I'm going to move on to the next slide of the video so that I can point out where you will have found the French. So I asked you to find, I'm going to underline this in green to match the border. I asked you to find appearance, there it is, apparition. I asked you to find symptoms, which was a super easy cognate, symptôme. The word for some, here it is on line 3, en quelques semaines, meaning in some weeks. Okay. Then thousands, you might remember the French for thousand is just mille. Thousands is milliers. Okay. Then I asked for death, which is mort. Okay, that's some horrible memory techniques there. Mortuary, of course, is the name of where dead bodies would be kept prior to burial or cremation. And then the word plusieurs here means lots. It literally translates as several, to be honest. That's maybe a little bit better. But plusieurs can translate as a lot of, or lot, several. And then since is depuis. So we're not moving very far at all for our next answer, depuis. And then the last answer is dossier. Okay, And quickly onto the reason why it is called coronavirus. It's actually this bit here, entouré d'une petite couronne. So that means surrounded by a little crown. They say that's what the actual virus looks like in a microscope, and that's where the name has come from. Okay, let's move on to your second challenging text. Okay, so here is your next text. And on this slide, we have got 3 questions about the coronavirus which came from China, which brings me quite nicely to your first task on this slide, which is here at the top. Got a bit of a grammar challenge. I would like you to find and underline or highlight or list all the verbs that you can find in the past tense. Okay, remember, most past participles actually do end in an E accent because most verbs end in ER, and that's the way that we form past verb. But I will warn you that there's only a couple on this article that actually end that way. So don't just be looking out for that standard E accent ending. So you're going to have to pause the video. I'm going to go straight away into your answers and underline for you all of the past verbs. So do pause it, list as many as you can find, because here are your answers. Okay, the first one I could find was venu, which means came, because we know this virus came from China. The next one is in actually the second question, apparu, because it's asking how did it appear, really. Okay, and then we've got transmis, which is transmitted. Okay, and then we have got vendu, which means sold. You probably saw on the news that it's about animals being sold at a market. Okay, we've got transmis again, but then I want to look at this one, commencer, where it's saying the illness started, commenced, started to do, whatever it was. Then we have got, this is a funny one because this can be a past participle, ity, meaning like was, because this is like have been. So many people have been. And then you might think, oh, past participle, contaminé. Contaminé, without the extra endings there, yep, can be a past participle, meaning contaminated. This is a weird one because it's talking about people being contaminated. So it works a bit like an adjective, I suppose, but it still has got that past verb ending. Okay, we have another past participle here, découvert, which means discovered. And then I think we've got one more just up on the right up here, which is in the third question. Just done a horrible red scribble under the pris, past verb, which means taken or took. Okay, so that was the first challenge that I wanted you to do. Now I'm going to move on to your next vocabulary tasks onto the next slide, and obviously you'll be able to look back at this. You can go back a little bit and pull the text apart and understand as best you can. So here is the task slide. Right, so it's a quite extended find the French there, and some comprehension questions on the right. And I would like to point out, just in terms of exam technique, GCSE students out there, that those questions 1 to 5 are in English, so you would need to answer in English because you need to stick to the same language of the question. If you answered any of those questions there on the right in French, it would be automatically ignored or marked wrong. Okay, so I am going to ask you to pause because I'm going to whiz on through the answers in a moment and move on to the next slide and point out some of the find the French for you. So you'll want to rewind the video a little bit, find the French for those words and phrases on the left and answer those questions. So here are your answers. Okay, so firstly, I'm actually going to go through the comprehension first before I move on in the video, those English questions there, because then I can move on to the next slide and I can actually highlight in the text the find the French. So it makes more sense to do it that way. So the questions, how did the coronavirus appear? Hopefully you've got that it was passed from a bat to another animal, which according to the articles and text previously was unknown. Number 2, how many people were contaminated in just a few weeks? It was 20,000. Okay. Number 3, when was the first patient outside China discovered? This was le 8 janvier, which is the 8th of January. What is compulsory to wear in China? It was masks, because they're compulsory in some countries, but not everyone. And number 5, what is avoided in China and around the world? This was large gatherings. Okay, so I am now going to go through your Find the French, and rather than me just read it out to you, I'll move on to the text again so I can hopefully find them as I talk it through with you and circle them. So I think I'm going to stick with red, I think, because it stands out hopefully quite easily. Right then, so I asked you to find the whole world, and here it is at the top of the introduction. Le monde entier is the whole world. Okay, the next word I asked you to find, I'm just going to underline it because they're quite small text, aren't they? Contagious is contagieux. Then I asked you to find the word for a cold, which is here. It was said it gives a simple cold, which in French is une rhume. Okay, then we asked you to find illness, which is maladie. And then the word for flu is grippe. And then I asked you to find the verb worries. It worries, and that's it there. That's the verb inquiète, and that's the big sentence starter saying the COVID-19 worries people, basically, because, and it goes on to give a few reasons for that. Okay, we asked you to find the French for a bat, which is this here in the middle section. Une chauve-souris. Have you worked out what that translates as word for word? It actually means, remember, chauve from year 7 means bald, so it actually means a bald mouse, the French word for bat. I suppose that makes quite a lot of sense, really. And then I asked you to find human being. Here we go, être humain. So I hope that makes perfect sense to you, because you should know the verb être means to be or being, so human being. And then I asked you to find the verb to spread out, so that's se répandre there. And then the word for coughs, was it? Let me see if I can find it. Okay. I'm going to move on to the top. Right then. So what we have there, found it. Sorry about the delay. I really didn't want to start the slide again. Here we go. It was tous and it was éternue. That was the next two answers, GCSE students. Tous coughs and éternue sneezes. That's those two verbs in the third person. Okay, and finally, it was to forbid or to ban things. And I know the answer is interdire. And there it is. Thought I wasn't going to be able to find it there. Interdire, meaning to forbid. Okay, it's very well done. We are now going to move on to your next challenge. And here it is. So here you have, based on the text you've been reading and pulling apart and hopefully understanding fairly well so far, a gap fill. So I'm obviously going to ask you to pause the video and fill in the gaps on this slide. Okay, so I'm going to draw an extra line at the end because there was actually, I don't know how I copied and pasted it, but I missed that out. So there is another word that needs to go on the end just to finish that paragraph off. Okay, so pause, please, the PowerPoint video, because I'm going to go through the answers straight away. Okay, so here are your answers. All right, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to do this by number because it's much quicker and less painful for you lot than watch me trying to write in every word. So our first gap, number 1, le coronavirus est très, and your first answer is here up at the top. I've just written the number 1, contagieux, meaning contagious. Okay, il se transmet surtout par les airs en respirant près d'une malade qui, and your next one, number 2, is here, qui tousse ou éternue, who coughs or sneezes. Okay, de plus, quand quelqu'un, so your third gap, it's when somebody, and you want this verb up here, attrape le virus, when someone catches the virus. And then it is moving on, so your fourth gap, on ne s'en aperçoit pas tout de suite. And that basically means you don't know, you don't realise it straight away. Okay, and then we move on. La maladie ne se déclare qu'au bout de quelques, and we want here jours, which is basically saying that this illness doesn't really show itself for a few days. So there's your number 5 answer. Gap 6 is here. Pendant ce temps-là. This is your number 6 answer, which means during this time. La personne peut. It's got a modal verb here, meaning the person can. And what you need, this is your number 7. The person can contaminate beaucoup de monde, lots of people. Okay, then we are moving on to gap number 8 here, which is évitant. En évitant. I'm just going to underline the key spelling here. It's the ANT ending of the verb. It's really stylish if you can put en in front of a verb ending in ANT, and it means by doing something. So this is by avoiding, en évitant. Okay, gap 9, here we go, is here. Veulent empêcher la contamination et continuer de. We need an infinitive here, and the infinitive we need is here, protéger, continue to protect. And your last answer is the population. Protect the population, protéger la population. Okay, so there is a full translation task there, an expectation for you that I'd love you to have a go at. As I've gone through the answers with you there, I've given most of it away. There's a few little bits that I missed out. So try and fill in the gaps. And I'm going to move straight on to the next challenge. Okay, so here is your next challenge, your next set of texts and articles and paragraphs to pull apart. Your vocab tasks are actually on this slide in front of you as well, to the right. So I'm asking you to find the English translations for those 6 bits of vocab and expressions there, and also summarise in English the 4 steps taken by the French government to deal with the coronavirus and the spreading of this virus. Okay, so obviously I'm going to crack on straight away with your answers, so please can you pause the video, have a go at that, and off I go with your answers. So environ 140 hôpitaux means about or approximately 140 hospitals. Okay, you don't know what I'm doing, this bit up here, I'm not going to write it in when I can talk you through it far less painfully. The next one is chambre spéciale, basically is special bedrooms. So we're talking about hospitals though, so we'd say special rooms, or even better, specialist rooms. Because remember, we have to translate things, not always word for word, but what sounds best in the context. Okay, the next one is a pretty tricky one. Prendre en charge très vite les personnes malades. This is in the second paragraph down here where I've ticked when they're talking about testing. So it literally means to take charge, and it's quickly get a hold of the sick people so that they can look after them. Okay, because as a result of all the effective testing over in France. And then 4th one down, plusieurs millions de masques means several million masks. So that's that one. L'obligation de fermer is the obligation to close, which probably wouldn't be a great translation if we were translating the whole text, because that comes from down here. Yeah, just have a little look at this bit down here. Word for word, it means hundreds of school establishments have had the obligation to close. If you were putting that into a translation, you just wouldn't word it like that. You'd say hundreds of educational establishments had to close or were obliged to close. Okay? And then finally, plusieurs événements means several events. Okay? And summarising it here at the bottom, I'll just talk you through super quick because it's basically the title of each of these short paragraphs. So summarise the steps taken. Number 1 was preparing the hospitals. Number 2, testing. Number 3, the making of face masks. And number 4, closing schools. And it does also mention in paragraph 4, even though it's not in the title, it does also mention the banning of large gatherings. Okay, which is keeping big numbers of people apart. Okay, your final reading challenge before I move on to the writing section of this challenging lesson. I would like you to copy and complete or print and fill in the gaps those 5 sentences at the bottom link into your understanding of all of those bits of info at the top. So have a pause, have a read, and off you go. And here are your answers. Number 1, if you touch an infected object. I'll circle the key areas in the text. It does go in order though here, I'm pretty sure. Here we go, objet infecté. And bring it's your hand to your face. You risk contamination. So it was main, and if you didn't know, visage. I suppose it links to vision and it's where your eyes are and where you see, so that means face. Number 2, in order to protect them, you must be very attentive to your own personal hygiene, which basically is pay attention to your hygiene. And number 3, wash your hands every hour is what we need here. It says toutes les heures. Wash your hands every hour with soap, etc., etc. Use throw away. What we want there on number 4, there's the word for throw away. We're talking about mouchoir. And if you didn't know that meant tissues, I think the pictures make it pretty clear. Don't forget that if you are ever reading a text with pictures, or watching a French video, what you see in terms of actions and visuals are there to help your natural understanding. And number 5, cough and sneeze inside and what we want here is elbow. And there's the word I've just squared in red. Okay, moving. The second half of my coronavirus session that I put together for you is to give you the chance to learn or revise about modal verbs and be able to talk or write about your own lockdown experience. So firstly, let's look at some modal verbs. There are 3 main modal verbs in French. Vouloir means to want to. You probably remember je veux. Pouvoir means to be able to. Do you remember je peux, which means I can? And devoir means to have to. Okay, and you might remember je dois, meaning I must or I have to. Now this one here, you probably remember the word devoir as a noun. As a noun, it's actually plural. I'm going to write it out in full just so that you can make the connection, because to me this always made sense. You probably remember your teachers going on about les devoirs, which means homework. Now I think that this verb is not an easy one. But I actually used to remember what it meant by thinking, oh yeah, devoir is homework. The verb devoir means to have to, and I have to do my homework. So there was a bit of a connection there. Okay, so there's 3 main modal verbs. So have a think about what all these 6 sentences mean, French into English, just to get us started. Have a pause, because your answers are, okay, je veux manger au restaurant. Je ne veux pas manger au restaurant. I want to eat at a restaurant. I don't want to eat at a restaurant. Then you've got je peux manger au restaurant. I can eat at a restaurant. And then it's negative again. Je ne peux pas manger au restaurant. I cannot, I can't eat at a restaurant. Finally, je dois manger au restaurant. I have to eat at a restaurant, which is a bit weird. And last one, je ne dois pas manger au restaurant. I do not have to eat at a restaurant. So I want to point 2 things out to you before we move on. Firstly, a reminder how each of those expressions has quite simply been made negative. We have gone from je veux to je ne veux pas, putting the ne and the pas around the main verb. We've gone from je peux to je ne peux pas. Again, we are hugging, if you like, the main verb peut with ne and pas. And we've gone from je dois, I must, to je ne dois pas, I must not. So just a reminder that the ne and the pas, or whatever other fancy negative you might want to be using, go around the verb. And the other thing I'd like to point out to you here is that, I know this is a very boring slide because it's all about manger au restaurant. We're not really varying our infinitives very much, but it's an infinitive verb after any of these modal verb sentence starters. It's always going to be an infinitive verb meaning to do something. Okay, so there, in case you missed my verbal translations, are all of your answers. And now, a reminder that vouloir, pouvoir, devoir, they are all what we call modal verbs. And as I've said on the previous slide and annotated for you, they are followed by an infinitive. So vouloir, To want, je veux means I want. We've got pouvoir, which means to be able to. And we can start a sentence with je peux, I can. And devoir, to have to. Je dois, meaning I have to or I must. So you'll use these three verbs loads if you're going to, do my optional written task, which is to be able to talk about the lockdown. A sentence that probably makes sense to a lot of you is I want to go out with my friends, but I can't because I have to stay at home. I want, je veux, to go out. So I need an infinitive, yeah? Sortir avec mes amis. But, little linking word reminder, mais, I can't. Je ne peux pas. Because, parce que. I have to, je dois. Stay at home. Rester chez moi. Okay? So, for stay at home, by the way, you might have translated that as rester à la maison, and that would have been fine. So I'm going to circle the infinitives. We've got je veux sortir. I want to go out. So this is our modal verb sentence starter, followed by an infinitive. And then towards the end, we've got je dois rester chez moi. I have to stay at home. Now we do have another modal verb sentence starter here, but in fact, it's completing itself because that person's saying, I want to do this, but I can't. So we don't need to add anything to it there. But if we did want to add a verb, it would be an infinitive. Okay, so the three modal verb sentence starters we're going to focus on now as I whiz through some pictures with you they are I want, je veux, I have to, je dois, and I can't, je ne peux pas. Because these are very much in line with the whole lockdown experience, which is le confinement in French. So, please take the opportunity to repeat after me and then think which of those sentence starters on the previous slide, rewind, whenever you need to, would you place where I put the dots to make it make sense in terms of lockdown. So, sortir avec mes amis, sortir avec ma famille, sortir avec mon chien. So you could say, je veux sortir avec mes amis. I want to go out with my friends. Or you might say, je peux sortir avec mon chien. I can go out with my dog. Okay, repeat. Rester chez moi. A good one would be, je dois rester chez moi. I have to stay at home. Next, aller au parc. Aller au centre commercial. Aller au restaurant. Aller au cinéma. Aller chez mes amis. So a list of places that you may well want to go. Probably the best fit would be just that, yeah? Je veux aller au parc. I want to go to the park. Or possibly, je ne peux pas aller au cinéma. I cannot go to the cinema. Next, aller au collège. So probably a matter of opinion here. I would like to think that you would all enthusiastically add je veux aller au collège to the front of that sentence. I want to go to school. Or you might say je ne veux pas aller au collège. I don't want to go to school. Or maybe stating facts for the majority of the past 3 months. Je ne peux pas aller au collège. I cannot go to school. Aller à la plage, aller à la piscine. Je veux aller à la plage. Je ne peux pas aller à la piscine. I want to go to the beach. I can't go to the pool. Suivre des cours en ligne. So maybe this one would be je peux suivre des cours en ligne. I can follow online lessons. Or maybe it's je veux. I want to. Or maybe it's je ne peux pas. Or maybe it's je dois. I have to follow online lessons. Okay, next one. Jouer au foot, jouer au golf, jouer au cricket, jouer au tennis, jouer au basket. So for this one, firstly, the sports in French are super easy because they're pretty much all of them cognate, so identical or similar to the English. So again, I probably think you'd say je veux jouer au foot. Je peux jouer au golf. I can play golf. There's certain things, of course, that you can do during le confinement. Garder une distance de 2 mètres. Probably here you'd need, it's changed recently, but to keep a distance of 2 meters, je dois garder une distance de 2 mètres. I have to keep a 2 meter distance. Partir en vacances. Je veux Partir en vacances, I want to go. Partir means to depart or to leave. So we will translate it nicely, naturally to I want to go on holiday. Okay, so this slide, year 10 and 9, is a sentence structure help box basically, because I'm going to set an optional written task that I do hope many of you will have a go at and submit to your French teachers to get a bit of feedback on your written French, you know, particularly because we're thinking about GCSE, so do have a go. So this is here to help you structure your sentences. I'll talk you through the columns and then you can refer back to this at the end when, you know, you're going to have a go at this. The green column is your modal verb sentence starter. Je veux, I want. Je peux pas, I can't. Je dois, I have to. Then, as I've taught or reminded you in previous part of this second half of this lesson, they are always followed by an infinitive, which is actually fab, because if you want to talk about something a bit more different than the usual verbs, we've got jouer. Everybody knows jouer means to play, aller, to go. You can look it up, and however you find it in the dictionary, that is the infinitive form, usually that ends in er, ir, or re. And there are some irregular ones, but no matter what, you just put it exactly in its infinitive dictionary spelling. So for once, you don't have to think, oh, does it end in an E or ES or ONS or whatever? It's just in its infinitive. The pink bit is obviously just your noun and your information that you will follow that verb on with, okay? And that depends what you're going to be saying. The orange column is to remind you to add some simple basic development. So the one that's here is saying, why not add who with? All right, so you've got some easy ones at the top with my friends, with my family, etc., etc. And at the bottom, nice phrases, which I hope is revision for you, but if you've never met them before, that's the masculine, feminine spelling of how to say alone. Okay, tout seul, tout seul. And then the final column, the blue column, at the top, where it says connectives, this is a reminder of adding some linking words like also, and, but, just wherever you can in your writing to make it more stylish. And the bottom right hand box is asking you for adding on opinions and reasons. Okay, so here is a sentence from left to right which would be really quite impressive to your teaching staff. So, je veux sortir au parc avec mes amis, mais je ne peux pas, ce qui est vraiment triste. I want to go out to the park with my friends, but I can't, which is very or really sad. And that's quite nice. So please do use that as reference. Okay, a bit more reference help and support for the written task. What you have here are some sentence starters, like I think that, and giving an opinion. Je pense que. Remember, you've also got j'estime que, je crois que. Loads of ways of starting an opinion sentence. À mon avis there, in my opinion. Don't forget selon moi, according to me. And add as many of these lovely opinions, sentence starters into your work. On the right-hand side, you've got a couple of the what we call si clauses, what's the beginning of the sentence, and si means if. So here you've got if you're ill. I know it says there if one is ill. That's not really how we'd speak. So the general you. Si on est malade, if you're sick. Si on se sent malade, if you feel sick or ill, of course. You've got quite a few. I'm not going to read through them all. They're there for you. You've got quite a few other varied modal verb sentence starters which you could absolutely use, and that's brilliant because what you've got there is you've got them in the positive. So il faut is it's necessary to. So il ne faut pas, it's not necessary to. But again, fantastic news, they are all followed by the infinitive. Okay, right, so for this slide, what I would like you to do is translate all of those infinitive expressions into English. So do pause the video and put those all into full English translations for me. So the first one I will do with you, bien se laver les mains pendant 20 secondes. I would imagine the bit in brackets is probably helping you out there because that means during 20 seconds. Think back to March when all the advice was coming out, we all told to do for 20 seconds, it was wash our hands. And that means wash your hands well for 20 seconds. Okay, the infinitive verbs are there in bold print. They're the bits that are quite important now when they're following a modal verb. There's all your answers, so please do pause If I reveal the answers too quick for you, please rewind the video, pause it, try and translate it as best you can, and then I would like you now to self-check, see how well you translated those 20 infinitive sentences. Okay, moving on. So the next couple of slides are picture slides. I added this in from the PowerPoint that I found because I thought it would give you the chance to verbally check some of your modal verb sentences. So if we look at the aeroplane one, you could be practicing your pronunciation and your French speaking by saying je veux partir en vacances. I want to go on holiday. Okay. Or what I'd really like you to do, there's 20 pictures here. I'm not asking you to write 20 sentences. You've just done the translations with all the vocab you need for this. But it'd be really nice, GCSE students, if you'd pick 2 or 3 per slide and give yourself some varied modal verb sentence starter practice. So some of them being I want, then I can, then put some into the negative, etc., etc. Second slide of pictures coming up. Okay, so let's look at this fella up here. The infinitive verb from the initial slide with all the infinitive expressions on is paniquer, which means to panic. So on its own, it doesn't really do us any favours. Paniquer means to panic. What I would like you to be saying out loud to yourselves at home or writing down is maybe il ne faut pas paniquer. It's not necessary to panic. Je ne dois pas paniquer. I must not panic. Okay? Right, moving on. And here is your optional task. It would be great if you would have a go at writing about your experience of the lockdown. Your potential title, therefore, for this written task is Pendant le confinement, which means during lockdown. Okay? What you must include, if you're really up for the challenge and just really want to push yourself and try and produce some good French after all of this sort of time away from being in school, really want you to include definitely what you want to do, what you don't want to do, what you can and what you can't do, and what you have to do and what you don't have to do. So I want you to practice as many of those modal verb sentence starters in the positive and negative as you can. And remember, they are all followed by the infinitive, which I'm just going to write in here, just as a reminder to you, because that is a really good news. Okay, all modal verb sentence starters are followed by infinitive, which means that you just need to find a dictionary or an online dictionary, and that's the form of the verb that you basically just copy across. Now the bit at the bottom, extension, it's really essential. Any piece of writing or speaking has to have links like but, however, and qualifier words like very, really. Adding opinions and reasons is a must. And at the bottom, try and add any possible future tense sentences using the easy. We all know je voudrais is I would like. We've looked at je veux earlier in the video. Je veux is I want, followed by an infinitive. And je voudrais comes from the same verb actually, means I would like. It's just that it's in the conditional future. So je voudrais is also followed by the infinitive. They do the same job. Je veux partir en vacances. I want to go on holiday. Je voudrais partir en vacances. I would like to go on holiday. Okay, so any future tense wishes, thinking ahead to après le confinement, after lockdown. Okay, merci bien et au revoir.